Krishna, my name is Alakananda Devi Dasi. I am an initiated disciple of His Grace Sankarshan Das Adhikari Prabhuji, who is a direct disciple of His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, the founder Acharya of ISKCON, the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. In this video, I shall give you a brief summary of Chapter 7 of Bhagavad Gita as it is, Knowledge of the Absolute. Bhagavad Gita is an ancient religious text that was spoken by Lord Krishna, who is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Lord Krishna spoke the Bhagavad Gita about 5,000 years ago to the famous Kshatriya warrior Arjuna on the battlefield of Kurukshetra to motivate him to do his duty. Bhagavad Gita contains the essence of all the Vedic wisdom and serves as a valuable spiritual guide to help us lead our lives righteously in accordance with Lord Krishna's instructions so that we may become truly and eternally peaceful and blissful. Srila Prabhupada, the founder Acharya of ISKCON, who was a pure devotee of Lord Krishna, has given the most authentic English translation of the Bhagavad Gita in his book Bhagavad Gita as it is. We must all take advantage of his wonderful book, follow Lord Krishna's teaching sincerely, and make our lives truly sublime. In the verse number 1, Lord Krishna tells Arjuna to hear from him about understanding him completely by practicing yoga in full consciousness of him with his mind attached to him. Srila Prabhupada explains in his purport that Chapter 7 describes how Lord Krishna displays his opulences, about the 4 types of people who surrender to him, and about the 4 types of people who do not surrender to him and do not practice Krishna consciousness. Krishna consciousness is the steady concentration of the mind on the Supreme Lord Krishna under the guidance of the bona fide spiritual master, who is in the disciplic succession starting from Lord Krishna himself. It is also known as Bhakti Yoga and is the highest perfection of yoga. It involves performing pure loving devotional service to the Supreme Lord Krishna in any of the following 9 ways. Hearing and chanting his holy names, glories and pastimes, remembering him, serving his lotus feet, performing deity worship, offering prayers and obeisances to him, acting as his servant, acting as his friend, and completely surrendering to him. Lord Krishna is also known as the Absolute Truth because everything emanates from him and is the cause of all causes. The Absolute Truth is understood in 3 aspects: Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan. Brahman is the impersonal feature of the Absolute Truth and refers to the bright effulgence emanating from the transcendental or spiritual body of Lord Krishna, who is situated in his spiritual abode. Paramatma is the localized aspect of the Absolute Truth and refers to the Super Soul, who is seated in the hearts of all living entities and in all the atoms of the material universes. The term Bhagavan refers to the beautiful personal form of Lord Krishna, who is full of all the 6 opulences: beauty, wealth, strength, fame, knowledge, and renunciation. It is important to know about the Absolute Truth completely because it liberates us from the miserable material cycles of birth, disease, old age, and death forever. Srila Prabhupada wonderfully explains in his purport that the proper way to learn about the Absolute Truth is by hearing from Lord Krishna directly, as Arjuna heard, or by hearing from his bona fide representative, the spiritual master. In the verse number 2, Lord Krishna tells Arjuna that he will reveal knowledge about him completely, including the phenomenal aspect, which can be directly observed, and the numinous, that is the divine or spiritual aspect, which cannot be directly observed. The next verse number 3 is an important verse. Manushyanam sahasreshu kaschid yatati siddhaye yatatamapi siddhanam kaschin mam vetti tatataha. Out of many thousands of men, one may endeavor for perfection, and of those who have achieved perfection, hardly one knows me in truth. Srila Prabhupada wonderfully explains in his purport that people in the material world are mostly interested in animal propensities such as eating, sleeping, mating, and defending. Hardly anyone is interested in spiritual knowledge, that is, knowledge about the soul, the super soul, and the relationship between them. Such knowledge is highly valuable because it liberates us from material bondage. The transcendentalists who engage in philosophical speculation, that is the Gnanis, and those who perform severe austerities, that is the yogis, can at the most understand the absolute truth partially as the impersonal Brahman or the localized Paramatma. Only the bhaktas or devotees can understand the absolute truth completely because they perform pure loving devotional service to the Supreme Lord Krishna by strictly following all the rules and regulations. Such great souls are very rare. In verse number 4, Lord Krishna starts explaining the signs of God, that is, the constitutional position of God and his diverse energies. He says that earth, water, fire, air, ether, mind, intelligence, and false ego are his separated energies. Srila Prabhupada nicely explains in his purport that for the purpose of material creation, the plenary expansion of Lord Krishna assumes the forms of three Vishnus who are known as the Purusha avatars. The first is Mahavishnu, who creates the total material energy known as the Mahatattva. Numerous material universes emanate from his body when he exhales. The second is Garbhodakashaya Vishnu, who enters the material universes and creates diversities in each of them. The third is Kshirodakashaya Vishnu, who is diffused as the super soul or Paramatma in the hearts of all living entities and in all the atoms of the material universes. The material world is a temporary manifestation of one of the energies of the Lord known as the material or the external energy, and the three Vishnus direct its activities. Anyone who knows about these three Vishnus can be liberated from material entanglement. Lord Krishna is the original cause of the material manifestation. The 5 ingredients for material creation are earth, water, fire, air, and ether, and they are his separated energies. He is the completely energetic person who possesses different material and spiritual energies. The material world is a manifestation of his external or material energy, also known as Maya, whereas the spiritual world is a manifestation of his internal energy or spiritual energy. The body of the living entity is made up of 2 components, the gross material body and the subtle material body. The gross material body is made up of earth, water, fire, air, and ether, which are also known as the gross material elements. The subtle body is made up of the mind, intelligence, and false ego. The 5 material elements include the 5 sense objects such as the physical sound, form, touch, taste, and smell. False ego refers to the I, me, and mine concept that constitutes the basic principle of material existence. It includes the 10 sensory organs such as the eyes, ears, nose, and so on. Intelligence refers to the total material energy known as the Mahatattva. Next is verse number 5. Here Lord Krishna explains to Arjuna that the living entities belong to his superior spiritual energy and they are exploiting the inferior material energy, the material world and its resources. The living entities are in turn controlled by the Supreme Lord, who is all-powerful and completely spiritual. The material manifestation cannot function without the presence of the superior spiritual energy, that is the living entity. The living entities are qualitatively similar to the Supreme Lord because they are also spiritual in nature, but quantitatively they are much smaller and not as powerful as the Supreme Lord. Hence, they are subordinate to him. Under the influence of the Lord's illusory energy Maya in the material world, the living entity forgets his original constitutional position as the spirit soul, part and parcel, and the eternal servant of the Supreme Lord Krishna. He wrongly identifies himself with the temporary material body and tries to exploit the material resources for his sense enjoyment. He thus gets bound to the miserable material cycles of birth and death. Only by practicing Krishna consciousness sincerely, he will be liberated from material bondage. In the verse number 6, Lord Krishna reveals that everything in the material world is a combination of matter and spirit. The material world is manifested only on the basis of the spiritual energy. Matter cannot function on its own without the presence of spirit. For example, the human body grows and develops due to the presence of the spirit soul within it. A child thus grows into a youth and then into an adult. Similarly, the gigantic material universe develops due to the presence of the super soul or the Supreme Lord, who is Lord Krishna or Lord Vishnu. Matter and spirit are different energies of the Supreme Lord, and hence Lord Krishna is the original cause of everything. The material manifestation is maintained for a certain period of time and is then destroyed by the will of the Lord. Lord Krishna is therefore the original cause of creation, maintenance and dissolution of the material world. Next, verse number 7 is an important verse. Mattaha parataram nanyat kinchedasti dhananjaya Mayi sarvam idam protam sutre madigana iva. O conqueror of wealth, there is no truth superior to me. Everything rests upon me as pearls are strung on a thread. Srila Prabhupada clearly explains in his purport that this verse stresses on the very important fact that the absolute truth is a person. The impersonalists wrongly think that the absolute truth is formless and impersonal. However, in the Brahma Samhita it is mentioned, Ishvaraha Parama Krishna Sachidananda Vigraha Anadiradir Govinda Sarvakarana Karanam. Lord Krishna, who is also known as Govinda, is the supreme controller and the original primeval Lord. He has an eternal spiritual body of knowledge and bliss, and he is the cause of all causes. Several scriptures also confirm that Lord Krishna is the absolute truth and he is the supreme personality of Godhead. He is all-pervading with his different material and spiritual energies. Verse number 8 is also an important verse. Rasoham apsu kaunteya prabhasmi shashi suryayo Pranavaha sarva vedeshu shabdaha ke paurusham rishu. O son of Kunti, I am the taste of water, the light of the sun and the moon, the syllable Om in the Vedic mantras. I am the sound in ether and the ability in man. This verse nicely explains how the Supreme Lord Krishna is all-pervasive through his diverse material and spiritual energies. The Lord is initially perceived impersonally through his energies. Srila Prabhupada wonderfully gives the example of sunshine. Just as the sun god is perceived through his diffuse energy, the sunshine, similarly the Supreme Lord Krishna is perceived through his various material and spiritual energies. One way of perceiving the Lord is by tasting water. Lord Krishna says he is the taste of water. The pure taste of water is the active principle of water, and it is one of the energies of Lord Krishna. The impersonalist perceives the Lord by tasting the water, whereas a personalist or a devotee also glorifies the Lord for providing water to quench his thirst. One who understands God realizes that both the impersonal and personal conceptions are simultaneously present in everything. The light of the sun and the moon come from the bright effulgence called Brahmajyoti that emanates from the transcendental body of Lord Krishna, who is situated in his spiritual abode, Goloka Vrindavana. Pranava or Omkara is the transcendental sound present at the beginning of every Vedic hymn, and it addresses the Supreme Lord. Impersonalists who are ignorant of the personal form of the Lord prefer to say the Omkara rather than by addressing the Lord with his innumerable names. The variety of sounds that we hear and the variety of abilities that we see in human beings are all manifestations of the Lord's energy. Thus, we can understand clearly that the jurisdiction of Krishna consciousness extends everywhere. One who knows about Lord Krishna is fortunate because he becomes liberated from material bondage. One who does not know Krishna is unfortunate because he remains in material bondage. In the subsequent verses, Lord Krishna elaborates that he is the original fragrance of the earth, the heat in the fire, the life of all living entities, the penance of the ascetics, the original seed of all existence, the prowess of all the powerful men, and the intelligence of the intelligent people. He also represents sex life, which is in accordance with dharma or religious principles. This means that sex should be used only for procreation and not for recreation. Married couples should raise their children to become Krishna conscious individuals. Verse number 12, Lord Krishna explains that the three material modes, that is the modes of goodness, passion and ignorance, are manifestations of his material energy and are under his control. The three modes conduct the material activities, but the Supreme Lord is unaffected by them. He is therefore called Nirguna. The term Nir means unaffected, whereas Guna refers to the material modes or qualities. This is one of the characteristic features of Bhagavan, Lord Sri Krishna. In the verse number 13, Lord Krishna tells us that all living entities are bewildered by the material modes and hence unable to understand him. Srila Prabhupada clearly explains that people are affected differently by the modes according to their karma and acquire certain qualities. Thus, there are four classes of men: the Brahmanas, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas, and Shudras. They are suited to perform different occupational duties according to the qualities acquired from the modes. For example, the Brahmanas are the intelligent class of men who are situated in the mode of goodness and are suited to perform priestly duties and imparting education to others. The Kshatriyas are situated in the mode of passion, and they are the warrior class of men suited to fight in the war and protect the country. The Vaishyas are situated in the mode of passion as well as ignorance, and they are suited to perform business, cow protection and farming. The Shudras are situated mostly in the mode of ignorance and are suited to perform hard labor and serve the upper three classes. The next is verse number 14. It is an eye-opening verse. Vaiviyesha gunamayi mama maya duratyaya mameva ye prapadyante maya metam tarantite. This divine energy of mine, consisting of the three modes of material nature, is difficult to overcome, but those who have surrendered unto me can easily cross beyond it. Srila Prabhupada vividly explains in his purport that all the energies of the Supreme Lord Krishna are divine and are acting according to his will. Living entities belong to Lord Krishna's superior spiritual energy, but when they come in contact with his inferior material energy, they become bewildered and are influenced by it. They forget their true nature as the spirit soul and identify themselves wrongly with their temporary material bodies. They go for sense gratification and become entangled in material miseries lifetime after lifetime. Such conditioned living entities are called Nitya Baddha, that is, eternally conditioned. We cannot trace the exact time in history when the living entities became conditioned by the material energy, and hence they are said to be eternally conditioned. It is impossible for us to become free from the clutches of Maya, the Lord's illusory energy, on our own. Hence, we must surrender to the Supreme Lord Krishna and serve him with love and devotion under the guidance of the bona fide spiritual master. Then, by the mercy of Guru and Lord Krishna, we could become free from material bondage. Srila Prabhupada gives the wonderful analogy of a man tied with ropes of illusion. The word guna has two meanings. One is material modes or qualities, and the other is ropes. A man who is tied with ropes can be untied only by a person who is not bound by the ropes, and that includes the Supreme Lord Krishna or his pure representative, the spiritual master. Hence, we can understand that it is very important to surrender to the spiritual master and obey his instructions sincerely in order to become liberated from material bondage. The demigods such as Brahma and Shiva cannot liberate us from material bondage because they are also under the influence of Maya and the material modes. Only Lord Krishna or Lord Vishnu, who is the master of Maya, can liberate us from material bondage. In verse number 15, Lord Krishna explains that there are four types of miscreants or dushkritinaha who do not surrender to him. They are the mudhas, the naradhama, the maya paharata gnana, and the asuram bhavam ashritaha. The first category, the mudhas, are the grossly foolish people who work hard to enjoy the fruits of their labor and do not offer the results of their work to the Supreme Lord Krishna. They are ignorant about their true nature, about the Supreme Lord and their relationship with him. They engage only in mundane activities and refuse to hear about the Lord's pastimes and glories. The next group, the Naradhamas, are the lowest among mankind because they follow social and political principles but refuse to follow the religious principles. They are ignorant about God and scriptures and willfully neglect the prime duty of human life, that is to hear about and to love God. Then the third group, Maya Paharata Gnana, are the intellectuals such as the scientists, the philosophers, the educators, and the writers, whose erudite knowledge has been stolen by the illusory energy of the Lord called Maya. They are misled by the illusory energy and hence disobey the Lord. Then the fourth category of miscreants are the Asuram Bhavam Ashritaha, who are openly atheistic and demonic in nature. They decry the Supreme Lord and concoct illusory incarnations. All the four types of miscreants do not surrender to the Supreme Lord Krishna and thus waste the most valuable human form of life. In verse number 17, Lord Krishna tells us about four types of pious people, Sukritinaha, who surrender to him. They include the people who are distressed, those desiring wealth, those who are inquisitive, and those who are pursuing knowledge about the absolute truth. They are willing to follow the regulative principles and are inclined to hear about God. Initially, they may expect something in return for their service to the Lord, but as they continue to hear from and associate with pure devotees, they become purified and gradually give up all their selfish desires. Out of these four types of Sukritina, Lord Krishna says, the one who is in full knowledge of him and is completely devoted to him is the most dear to him. Next is verse number 19. It is a very important verse. Bahunam janmanam ante gnanavan mam prapadyate vasudeva sarvam iti samahatma sudurlabha. After many births and deaths, one who is actually in knowledge surrenders unto me, knowing me to be the cause of all causes and all that is. Such a great soul is very rare. Srila Prabhupada clearly explains that after performing devotional service for many lifetimes, a living entity comes to realize that the Supreme Lord Krishna is the ultimate goal of spiritual realization. He becomes attached to the Supreme Lord and therefore surrenders to him. He understands that Lord Krishna's mercy is everything and the material manifestation is not independent from him. Material creation is a perverted reflection of the spiritual variegatedness, and in everything there is a relationship with Vasudeva or Lord Krishna. He thinks of everything in relationship with Lord Krishna, who is all-pervading and all-powerful. Such a universal vision of Vasudeva or Lord Krishna leads to complete surrender as the highest perfection of human life. Such completely surrendered great souls are very rare. In the next few verses, Lord Krishna explains that men who are of low intelligence and who have material desires worship demigods according to the rules and regulations. They are materially contaminated and are usually situated in the lower modes of passion and ignorance and worship demigods for temporary material benefits. They are ignorant about the Supreme Lord Krishna. When a person becomes reasonably free from material contamination, he starts serving the Supreme Lord Krishna. The Supreme Lord is all merciful and he gives independence to the living entities to either serve him selflessly or to enjoy with their senses separately from him. As the super soul in the heart of all living entities, the Supreme Lord knows about his desires and tries to help the living entity fulfill his desires. If he knows that a certain individual is interested in worshipping a certain demigod, he makes his faith steady so that he could devote himself to that particular demigod. The living entities as well as the demigods cannot really achieve anything on their own. The living entity cannot independently worship a demigod, nor can a demigod bestow any benediction to him without the supreme will. Hence, it is said that not a blade of grass can move without the will of the Lord. In verse number 23, Lord Krishna explains that those who worship the demigods attain the demigod planets, whereas those who worship him attain his supreme spiritual abode. The demigods and their planets are situated in the material world, and hence demigod worship is on the material platform. The Supreme Lord Krishna and his abode are situated in the spiritual world, and hence worship of the Supreme Lord is on the spiritual platform. Demigods and their planets are perishable, and hence the boons obtained from the demigods are temporary. On the other hand, the Supreme Lord and his planet are eternal, and the boons obtained from the Supreme Lord are eternal and unlimited. Demigod worshippers are foolish because they do not know to which part of the body food has to be supplied. The Supreme Lord is like the belly. Just as by supplying food to the belly, all the body parts get nourished, similarly, by serving and worshipping the Supreme Lord sincerely, all living entities could be satisfied and all our desires could be fulfilled by the mercy of the Lord. In verse number 24, Lord Krishna explains that unintelligent people think that he, the Supreme Lord, was impersonal before and has now assumed a personal form. They do not know his higher nature, which is imperishable and supreme. Srila Prabhupada clearly explains that, similar to the demigod worshippers, the impersonalists are also foolish and ignorant. They think that the Supreme Lord is impersonal, although Lord Krishna was personally present and spoke the Bhagavad Gita to Arjuna on the battlefield of Kurukshetra. The Supreme Lord cannot be understood simply by mental speculation or by study of Vedic literatures. He is understood only by performing pure loving devotional service. One simple method of serving the Supreme Lord is by chanting the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. In verse number 25, Lord Krishna reveals that he is unmanifest to the foolish because he is covered by his internal potency. Hence, they cannot understand that he is unborn and infallible. From this verse, we can understand that the Supreme Lord's form is eternal, spiritual, and imperishable. His body is not subject to birth, disease, old age, and death, unlike the bodies of the conditioned souls. Verse number 26, Lord Krishna explains that he knows about the past, present, and future of all living entities, but no one really knows him. Srila Prabhupada nicely explains that the Supreme Lord's body is not material. Those with material bodies do not know about their past and future, nor do they clearly understand their present. Hence, the impersonalist opinion that the Supreme Lord's body is material is refuted. The impersonalists are deluded by the Lord's illusory energy Maya and are hence able to understand only the impersonal feature of the Lord as the Brahman. In verse number 27, Lord Krishna reveals that all living entities are born into delusion and are bewildered by dualities arising from desire and hate. Srila Prabhupada wonderfully explains that the illusory energy is manifested in the duality of desire and hate. Due to desire and hate, the ignorant people cannot understand the Supreme Lord Krishna. They only think that he is created by the material energies. Such deluded people are carried away by material dualities such as heat and cold, honor and dishonor, riches and poverty, and so on. Verse number 28 is an important verse which tells us that those who are pious are able to engage in the service of the Supreme Lord Krishna. When their sinful reactions are eradicated and they become free from the dualities of delusion, they continue rendering service to the Supreme Lord with great determination. Srila Prabhupada nicely explains in his purport that elevation to the spiritual platform is possible only by the association of pure devotees who free us from delusion. In the Srimad Bhagavatam 5.5.2, it is mentioned that service to the devotees is essential in order to be liberated from material bondage. On the other hand, association with materialistic people leads to ignorance. Verse number 29 tells us that intelligent people enduring for liberation take refuge in the Supreme Lord Krishna and engage sincerely in his devotional service. Such people are actually Brahman because they fully know about the transcendental activities. They eventually attain the Lord's spiritual abode, which is the highest perfection of human life. In verse number 30, Lord Krishna declares that those who are in full consciousness of him and know him to be the Supreme Lord, the governing principle of the material manifestation, the demigods, and all methods of sacrifice, can understand him and know him even at the time of death. Srila Prabhupada clearly explains that by always practicing Krishna consciousness sincerely in the association of pure devotees, a person will be able to remember Lord Krishna even at the time of death and thus is able to attain his eternal spiritual abode. Srila Prabhupada also emphasizes on the important fact that the human form of life is a great opportunity to practice Krishna consciousness and revive our original lost relationship with the Supreme Lord Krishna, who is the eternal loving Father of all living entities. By engaging in devotional service, a living entity is reinstated in his original constitutional position as the eternal servitor of the Lord. He becomes fully blissful simply by serving the Lord and pleasing him. He gradually becomes detached from material things and is completely satisfied simply by serving the Lord. He is completely convinced that all his objectives are fulfilled just by serving and glorifying the Lord. Such a determined faith is called Dhrida Vrata, and it is the beginning of Bhakti Yoga or transcendental loving service. And it is the verdict of all scriptures. So that was about the summary of chapter 7 of Bhagavad Gita as it is. In my next video, I shall talk to you about chapter 8. Thank you. Hare Krishna.